Billionaire CEO fired black waitress until his disabled son danced with her. Sit down now. Don't embarrass me in front of everyone. The words of a billionaire father cracked through the golden silence of a Manhattan restaurant on a stormy night. His son, legs trapped in metal braces, stood trembling, reaching for a waitress who had nothing but courage in her eyes. Pride and shame collided in that moment, exposing a wound no wealth could hide. What would you have done in his place? Welcome to Emotional Echoes, a channel where emotions come alive and every story leaves a lasting echo in your heart. Please subscribe to Emotional Echoes channel. Help us reach 1,000 subscribers so more souls can feel these stories. Now, let me tell you what happened next. Stay with my video till the very end and let me know where you're watching from so I can see how far this story spreads. A billionaire's son, trapped in metal braces, asked a black waitress to dance in the middle of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, and the moment shattered his father's world. The clinking of crystal glasses froze. Conversations died. All eyes turned to the small boy whose hand stretched upward, trembling but determined. Lucas Montgomery's voice cracked as he pleaded, "Would you dance with me, please?" The silence was cut by Thornton, the manager, sharp and merciless. "Sit down, boy. This is not a circus. And you, get back to work." Ethan Montgomery, master of investments and power, rose from his chair, his voice low but lethal. "Lucas, sit down now. Do not disgrace me in front of these people." The boy's tears spilled, his chest heaving. "You're ashamed of me, aren't you, Dad? You wish I had died in that accident." The words stabbed deeper than any knife. Gasps spread across the golden hall. Maya's fingers trembled as she tore the apron from her waist, but her voice held steady. "I can't dance in this uniform, but if you'll lead, I'll follow." Ethan roared, his fury echoing. "Who gave you the right to touch my son? You're finished tomorrow." Yet Lucas clung to her hand, dragging one brace across the floor with a screech, then another. The wealthy whispered, their words like poison. The crippled heir, dancing with a waitress. How pathetic. Ethan froze, rage colliding with memory. He saw Elizabeth, his late wife, guiding their boy across the living room carpet, laughing as his small feet stumbled. Her words returned like a haunting. "It's not about perfection, Ethan. It's about connection." For the first time in years, the billionaire could not breathe. Maya guided Lucas back to the table, her hand steady on his trembling arm. The whispers started before they even sat down. A crippled boy dragging a waitress across the floor. What a disgrace. The laughter was soft but poisonous, cutting into the boy's pride. Ethan's hands shook against the linen tablecloth, rage simmering under his polished exterior. He wanted to shout, to tear down the stairs around him, but instead he reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek business card. He placed it in Maya's hand with a voice that cut like ice. "My office, tomorrow, 10 o'clock sharp. Don't be late." The card looked absurd in her worn fingers, the sharp edges pressed against skin used to carrying trays and scrubbing floors. Maya said nothing, but her chin lifted, eyes unbroken. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with smug satisfaction. They thought they had witnessed a fall, but something else was taking root. Lucas's chest heaved as he stared at his father. "Why did you humiliate her? She's the only one who sees me." The words were heavier than the braces on his legs. The boy's face burned with anger and shame, a storm his father refused to face. Ethan's eyes turned on him, sharp and cold as steel, offering no answer. He leaned back in his chair, silent, a man whose power came not from words, but from the weight of his silence. The distance between father and son was wider than the marble floor that had just witnessed their broken dance. The lobby of Montgomery Tower gleamed with glass and marble, a temple of wealth where every detail screamed power. Maya's reflection stared back at her from the polished floor as she clutched her old purse. She gave her name at the desk, and within minutes Thornton appeared, his smirk sharp as a blade. "People like you don't last long in places like this," he muttered, his eyes raking over her simple blouse and skirt. She lifted her chin. "We'll see." He led her to the top floor, where the air felt colder. Ethan Montgomery was already waiting, his back to the city skyline, as if he owned every building below. He turned slowly, eyes hard, voice controlled. "Sit. Tell me who you really are." His questions came fast, slicing through her composure. "Why wait tables? Why throw your life away?" She held his gaze. "I studied child development at NYU. I started a small program for kids with disabilities. But when my mother got sick, I left school to work." Something flickered in his eyes, quickly hidden. He tapped his pen against the desk. "You founded something, and now you serve cocktails. That's the story." She nodded without shame. "That's the reality." His voice dropped lower, a calculated strike. "I can pay you 10 times what you make. Leave this waitress nonsense behind. Be Lucas's private aide. He needs structure. He needs someone strong." Her breath caught, but only for a second. "No, your son doesn't need another employee. He needs a father who listens." The words landed heavy, echoing across the glass office. Ethan's jaw tightened, his voice rising. "You think dignity pays the bills. Pride won't save you. You'll end up with nothing." She leaned forward, her voice steady as stone. "And you'll end up with a son who feels like nothing." The silence cracked between them. For a moment, even Ethan had no answer. Maya reached into her purse and slid a worn card across his desk. "Freedom Steps. Tuesdays at 4. Bring him if you dare." She stood, her shoulders straight, and walked out, leaving the billionaire staring at the small card as if it were a challenge to his empire. The penthouse was quiet except for the soft hum of the city far below. Ethan loosened his tie and poured himself a drink, trying to bury the sting of Maya's words. Lucas wheeled himself into the room, his eyes burning. "You never come with me to therapy. You never even look at me when I try." Ethan set the glass down too hard, liquid spilling over his hand. "I hire the best doctors money can buy. I make sure you have everything. What more do you want?" Lucas's voice cracked as he pushed his chair closer. "I want you, Dad, not your money." The words hit Ethan harder than any insult in a boardroom. His chest tightened, his throat dry, yet pride held his tongue. Lucas's face twisted in frustration, his small fists pounding against the armrest. "You don't see me. You see a problem to fix, not your son." The glass in Ethan's hand shattered against the counter, the sound sharp and violent. "You don't understand what I've lost." His voice trembled with rage and grief. The memory of Elizabeth's laughter filled his head, the weight of her absence pressing down on him like chains. Lucas flinched at the sound but didn't back down. "Maybe I don't, but I'm still here, and you keep pushing me away." Ethan turned, his breathing ragged, eyes glossy though he refused to cry. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking of a clock in the corner. The distance between them felt like an ocean, father and son standing on opposite shores, neither knowing how to cross. Ethan parked the black sedan at the curb, his jaw locked tight. Lucas stared out the window, watching the old brick building with nervous eyes. A faded sign read "Freedom Steps." Inside, the air was warm and filled with music that carried laughter instead of judgment. Children moved in every direction, some with crutches, others in wheelchairs, all dancing in ways that looked clumsy, yet full of life. Lucas froze, his hands gripping the wheels of his chair, unsure if he belonged. Ethan stepped in, his polished shoes sounding too sharp against the worn wooden floor. His gaze swept across the room with disdain. "This looks like chaos." His words dripped with irritation, his voice loud enough for others to hear. Maya appeared from across the room, her simple shirt carrying the program's logo. She met his glare without fear. "It's freedom, something you've never allowed him to taste." The words landed heavy, but Ethan's pride held his expression cold. Lucas's eyes widened as he watched a boy with a prosthetic leg create a playful rhythm, while a girl spun her wheelchair in smooth circles. They laughed, they failed, they tried again. For the first time in months, Lucas's lips curved into a small smile. But he glanced at his father, waiting for permission that never came. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. trapped between control and the boy's unspoken longing. The door at the back opened, and an older woman walked in with a cane carved in ornate detail. Her silver braids framed a face full of authority. "Dr. Elaine Mercer," Maya greeted softly. Ethan stiffened, his recognition instant. Mercer had sent him 3 proposals over the years, all of which he had rejected without reading. The woman's eyes locked on him. "I see you finally came. Not for me, for him." Ethan's shoulders tightened as he looked at Lucas again. "What is this place really?" he demanded, his voice cutting through the music. Maya stepped closer, calm but unyielding. "A research program. One you refused to believe in. I co-authored it with Dr. Mercer. Freedom Steps is not just dance. It's a method to teach children to lead their own movements, to rebuild not just their bodies, but their confidence." The room seemed to close in on Ethan. He had come expecting a small charity project run by a stubborn waitress. Instead, he found science, research, and a truth he had ignored. Lucas looked at him with pleading eyes, caught between fear and hope. For the first time, Ethan's control cracked, and he realized the walls of his empire might not protect him from what was happening inside this modest hall. The door of the community hall burst open, and the sudden glare of cameras filled the room. Reporters poured in with notepads and flashing lights, their voices overlapping in a storm of questions. Ethan stiffened, his fists curling as the chaos surrounded him. His glare cut straight to Maya. "You planned this. You used my son as your stage." His voice carried across the hall, cold and sharp enough to silence even the music. Maya did not flinch. She walked him to a wall covered with photographs of children, each frame showing progress that no one had believed possible. "These are not stories for the press. They are stories of survival." Ethan's jaw locked, but his eyes darted across the faces. Children lifting crutches, smiling in wheelchairs, standing taller than they had months before. He wanted to deny it, but the evidence pinned him down harder than any accusation. Lucas had been watching quietly, his small hands gripping the braces on his legs. The noise of the reporters faded from his ears as he pulled at the straps. Ethan's breath caught when he realized what his son was doing. "No, not here, not like this." But Lucas shook his head, determination etched in his face. With trembling fingers, he unclasped one brace and set it aside. The room froze. Every eye turned to the boy as he pushed himself upright, his legs shaking under his weight. One slow step. The scrape of his shoe across the floor was louder than all the cameras clicking. His body wavered, but he did not fall. A second step followed, clumsy and raw, but his own. The hall erupted. Children clapped, parents cheered, reporters captured every second. But in Ethan's ears, there was only the sound of his son's ragged breath and the sight of his small body fighting to move forward. His chest tightened until he could no longer contain it. The tears he had buried for years welled up and spilled across his face. For the first time, the mask cracked. The ruthless billionaire who commanded boardrooms now stood in front of strangers, broken by the courage of his son. Cameras flashed, recording not just an extraordinary moment, but the collapse of walls built from pride and grief. Ethan covered his face, but it was too late. Everyone had seen. The questions came fast, but one cut deeper than the rest. "Is it true, Mr. Montgomery, that you rejected this program 3 times? The room fell silent, every lens trained on him. Ethan's lips parted, but no sound came. His throat tightened as if the words were knives. He glanced at Lucas, still trembling on unsteady legs, and for the first time in years, Ethan looked small. The silence dragged on. Reporters shifted, pens hovered, breaths held. Ethan's chest heaved, his hands gripped the podium until his knuckles whitened. His mask was breaking, piece by piece, and the man who had always commanded now stood stripped by a simple question. His son's eyes met his, wide, pleading, and unbearably honest. Ethan inhaled sharply, the sound trembling in the microphone. His voice came low, almost a whisper, but the hall caught every syllable. Yes, the word hung heavy, and he closed his eyes, as if it cost him everything. Another breath, broken but steady, and I was wrong. The eruption was immediate. Gasps, flashes, the buzz of disbelief. But Ethan no longer heard the chaos. His shoulders sagged, his face lined with tears he could not stop. The truth had shattered the empire he built on control. Yet in the wreckage he felt something he had never known, the faint relief of a man finally letting go. The following week, headlines spread across the city. The billionaire who had always stayed untouchable now pledged 5 years of full funding for Freedom Steps. Yet Ethan surprised everyone, including himself, when he showed up again at the community center. Not with cameras, not with a speech. He came in silence, standing awkwardly at the back of the room, watching Lucas laugh among children who carried their own scars. He did not just write checks. He sat in on sessions, listening to Maya explain how movement created new neural pathways. The word neuroplasticity became a nightly study for him. Stacks of journals scattered across his desk where contracts used to sit. His colleagues whispered he had lost focus, but Ethan found himself more alert than he had ever been. Every Tuesday, he followed Lucas into the hall, and every Tuesday he learned to sit still and watch instead of command. The hardest part was facing Maya. One evening after class, when the children had gone, she wiped the mirrors clean and said what no one else dared. "Money cannot replace an apology." The words hit him harder than any headline. He swallowed, eyes dropping to the floor, then lifted them with raw honesty. "Then let me show it with my life." From that moment, he changed. He traded boardrooms for therapy chairs, late-night deals for research notes. He asked questions he never thought he would, about balance, about motor control, about hope. He practiced patience, something wealth had never taught him. And in the quiet moments, he sat beside Lucas, not correcting, not pushing, just being there. Little by little, the arrogance slipped away. The man who once measured value in profits began to measure progress in steps, however small. The father who once avoided his son's gaze now sought it out. Each smile from Lucas became more precious than any contract he had ever signed. Ethan Montgomery was no longer learning how to lead. He was learning how to follow. 6 months later, the new Freedom Step Center opened its doors. The wide hall gleamed with polished floors, mirrors, and banners painted by the children themselves. Families filled every seat, their faces glowing with anticipation. Music swelled as Lucas stepped into the center with 3 other children. His braces lighter now, his stride steady. He moved with confidence, not perfect, but free. The crowd erupted in applause, but his eyes searched for only one face. Ethan stood among the parents, no longer separated by wealth or status. He did not command, did not correct. He simply clapped, letting the sound of pride fill the room instead of his voice. Lucas caught his gaze, smiled, and turned back to his routine, stronger with every movement. For once, Ethan did not feel the urge to step in. He finally understood that his place was not in front, but nearby. Maya appeared beside him, her voice low enough for only him to hear. "He does not need you to hold him anymore." Ethan exhaled slowly, his lips curving into a quiet smile. "But he still needs me to stand beside him." The words carried no arrogance, only truth. As the music rose and the children finished their performance, the hall shook with cheers. Ethan felt the weight he had carried for years slip away, replaced by something new and fragile. Connection. Father and son bound again, not by control, but by trust. For the first time since the accident, Ethan Montgomery felt whole. A year later, Freedom Steps had spread far beyond its first walls. Branches opened in other states, and children who once hid in silence now filled stages with laughter and movement. Lucas stood before a crowd at one of these events, a small boy with a cane, but his voice steady as he spoke about courage. He had become a symbol not just for children with braces or wheelchairs, but for anyone who had ever felt unseen. Ethan watched from the side, not as the man in control, but as a father. When it was his turn to speak, he stepped forward slowly, his hands steady on the podium. Leadership is not about control. It is about courage to follow, even if the first step comes from a child. The words were simple, but the silence in the hall told him they had landed deep. The crowd rose in applause, but Ethan's eyes stayed on Lucas. He saw in him not weakness, but strength that could not be measured in dollars or contracts. What began as shame had turned into a new kind of legacy, one built on listening, on humility, and on love. It was a lesson he wished he had learned sooner, but one he would carry forever. And maybe that is what America needs most today. Not more power, but more courage to listen, more courage to follow when someone points toward a better way. Because sometimes the smallest step, taken by the most unlikely person, can change everything. From a shattered moment in a golden restaurant to the rebirth of a bond between father and son, this story reminds us that healing often begins where pride ends. It teaches us that love, compassion, and the courage to listen are worth more than any empire. Beyond one family, it is a message for all of us. Humanity grows stronger when we choose connection over control. If this story touched you, share your feelings in the comments. Please subscribe, like, and share emotional echoes so more hearts can be reached. Thanks for listening.